Welcome back to Lantern Insights. We're again playing this Profane War of Invention version. This opening hand here, I elect to mulligan. I think it's very close. Profane Tutor and War of Invention both being very good cards in the build, but I think the play patterns with it are just very awkward. For example, if your opponent goes Fetch Land Pass, what are you playing? If you cast the Needle, you have very little information to use it. You're likely wasting it, but you kind of have to either cast that or Cookbook. Cookbook does nothing for you in a lot of matchups and isn't a super relevant card. Yes, it'll have Profane Tutor and War of Invention coming down later, but I don't think a hand like this is keepable. And also on the draw, I'm fine with mulliganing fairly aggressively, and we get a much nicer hand here. It'll take a little bit for the Spire to be turned on, but we're not too worried about that. So we just ditch the second Profane Tutor here. And our opponent leads on Snow-Covered Forests and suspends a Crashing Footfalls. Now, because they played Snow-Covered Forest, I think there is some chance they may be on a more Blood Moon version, but it is very weird that they're on Snow-Covered Forest. Most Rhinos players are not, are on just regular basics. And here we're going to elect to take the Fire Ice. Yes, Lorien Revealeds are going to let them draw lots of cards, but we really want to be able to suspend the Tutor on 2. As they don't have any Force of Negation or anything like that yet, so we can hopefully get a bridge soon. As we take Fire Ice, we'll pop out their revealed cards here. And so they draw second Footfalls for turn. They're going to play their Misty, so we know everything that they have in hand. And so we're just going to suspend Tutor. Again, they don't have Force. We don't have to worry about that. And so we will be able to get bridge down before they're able to do much of anything. We're going to play this Pithing Needle, just kind of force them to use their fetches. And they do, different game. They fetch, obviously you want to crack, and they're going to use one Lorien Revealed in response. All of this I think is pretty reasonable from them, this is what you should be doing against Pithing Needle. We're going to name Boseiju, kind of their only main deck card that we really care about. Importantly, we are going to shuffle away this Thoughtseize, so we're not too worried about it. And they play the Breeding Pool tapped, which I think is important. It means they don't have, I guess they don't have much for 4 anyway, but it prevents a few things that they could have. And with no counter for Tutor here, I think we're in a pretty reasonable spot. So we're just going to run the bridge out. If they had something worse on top, like something that we actually cared about, we could War of Invention here for a Codex Shredder to get rid of it. But as it is, I'll just let them have Murktide. But at this point from Rhinos, especially game 1, if they're not actively... So they're going to draw 3. They do find an Odawara, however, they are tapped out, and so we can use Word to get it. Lots of options here. I'm going to play the Portable Hole. It's basically free if we tap it for War of Invention, and halves their clock, just gets it out of our hand. And so here we do grab that second Needle. Now main deck, we haven't seen any Flame of Anors, we haven't seen any Mutavaults. Not saying they don't have them in their deck, but it's not super likely at this point. And with the Pixis on top, Rhinos game 1, a lot of the challenge from the Rhinos matchup comes games 2 and 3 with their sideboard cards. But game 1, we're usually fairly straightforward in how we beat them. So here, we have the full lock, just going to continue to play lock pieces, suspend the Tutor. I think having access to Profane Tutor and War of Invention was quite strong this game, but we were somewhat fortunate that they had a draw that didn't line up great against us. We win this game, but let's see how we can do in game 2 when they have more sideboard hate for us. Sideboarding for this game, I elected to bring in Welding Jar and Needle. Most of their removal is destroy, like Force of Vigor, Flame of Anor. Needle also shuts down both of the channel lands that they usually play. Stonebrain and Voidmere to hopefully keep them off Rhinos, as if they have a much slower clock, we can can usually close those games out. And I brought in one copy of Get Lost. Just seeing the basic forest made me think that there was some possibility that they are playing Blood Moon. If I see Blood Moon in game 3 and it goes to, or in game 2 and it goes to game 3, then I'll bring the second one in. But for the first one, I'd only elected to bring in one because I didn't know for sure if they were playing it. Cutting Underworld Cookbook and Portable Hole. Cookbook isn't really relevant in this matchup. Their smallest creatures are either 2/2s or 4/4s if they have Shardless, so not really anything, like we don't have to worry about getting cards out of our hand for bridge. Grafdigger's Cage just isn't for this matchup. Cursed Totem also isn't for this matchup. And so yeah, cut those, brought in 5-for-5 swap, and we'll see how that goes. So we start on the draw again against Rhinos, and I think it is one matchup where play draw doesn't matter a huge deal. You know, they don't have a super fast clock. Even if they get Rhinos on turn 3, they can be attacking for lethal on turn 5 at the earliest usually. That's provided we've done some damage to ourselves. So we're not hugely worried, and being on the draw gives us access to an extra card. Here, I think this is a pretty good hand. We have interaction, bridge, way of protecting bridge. Obviously, we're still missing some pieces, but this deck is, you know, has a lot of tutors in mind for that to find those missing pieces. So we're going to lead on Inquisition, which is going to get forced, pitching Subtlety. And so obviously when you see a force used on hand disruption, it means that they usually have a very good hand. You know, it's not often, they're not going to force if they have nothing in hand. Like there's going to be something that they really want to protect. Otherwise, they'll just let you force. And we see they have a Brotherhood's End in hand. So obviously we're going to take it. Force, they don't have any blue spells, and Outburst, you know, we'll have an answer for that eventually. And like is standard practice, we're going to run out the Shredder before Lantern. And so here, I think we're in a pretty reasonable spot. We did find our next pieces pretty quickly, but we are going to have to somewhat play around Force Negation here. Again, they're playing these snow-covered basics, which is maybe it's more common than I know of, but I haven't seen it too much. So we do only have Force and one mystery card in hand. And so here, because their clock is slow, I like to play Lantern and Suspended Tutor. Because they have Force in hand, you know, it's going to take them 3 turns to kill us. We can get a Tutor down in that time, and Tutor kind of allows us to like get hand disruption and get the hand disruption, or to get around the Force, and then we can resolve the ensnaring bridge. Basically, the goal is to have 2 things they need to force in 1 turn. Importantly here, like if Force was a like if they don't look like they have a blue card. Sorry, they don't look like they have a blue card. They didn't counter the Lantern, so it's maybe was correct to go for the bridge here. But I do like having control of their top decks from this point on. And we mill a Blood Moon. Obviously, Blood Moon is pretty bad for us here. Most of the stuff we draw, you know, is not going to be super relevant. We do see that they Mystical Dispute now. We're not too worried at this point. We're going to play the bridge here, kind of force the counter out of their hand in order to like Profane Tutor resolving. The one slightly good news is we have a Shredder on top, so if Profane Tutor gets countered, then like we have time to dig. Let me just pop out their graveyard here. So like if they don't here, but if they did, drawing the Shredder, I guess we'd have to mill it anyway. Sorry, I was thinking we had an extra turn. We draw Voidmere. It's a bit late. Like from this point on, Rhinos is another deck where once you have the lock, it's pretty solid. Sorry about that. You know, Flame of Anor here is not the end of the world. With Welding Jar, honestly, the card draw is more problematic than destroying an artifact. And we do see, again, more of those basics in hand. So Flame, here it's basically 3 mana, kill a card that we spent 0 mana for. And the reason we mill it is for the card draw, not for the destroy an artifact, is that it is more powerful, allowing them to draw 2 cards at instant speed than it is allowing them to blow up our free welding jar. And from here, it's game over. They crack some fetches. They do have a Violent Outburst in hand, which I think they should be casting in their... They should be casting probably in our end step just to change what the top card of their library is. Would it matter here? Probably not, but it would be a slight change. And it's locked up, and I think this kind of shows Rhinos is a pretty solid matchup, but when there's always a risk of them bringing in too many sideboard hate cards that they actually dilute their own game plan. And generally, like if we're trading 1-for-1, we can do fairly well against that. And even you'll see here, if Bridge got destroyed, we have those constructs. So I think we just have a lot of axes on which we can combat Rhinos. Overall, very, very favorable matchup, I think, and good performance from the deck. I think the tutors did well, just being able to keep hands like we did in this game, where it was just Bridge and Welding Jar, because we know we know how consistent this deck is at finding pieces, just because of how many tutors it's playing. Yeah, overall, fairly straightforward game here. We're going to have some more interesting ones later in the week, but thought we'd start off with something nice and simple to start with.